Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello, welcome to Musical Talk. My name is Nick Hudson. I hope you are well, my dear listener, or listeners, I hope. We are going to be doing something that I've wanted to talk about for a while, and that is defending the Jukebox Musical. I'm here with my friend Rebecca. Hello, Rebecca. Introduce yourself.
Hi, Nick. I am Stagey Rebecca, as I'm known on Twitter by my very, very few followers. And I am a big fan of jukebox musicals.
Yes.
I will defend them with my life. So
Yes.
when I was asked to be on the podcast, I jumped at the chance.
Exactly. And, well, let's just start with the obvious. Jukebox musicals, they have a bit of a stigma, don't they? And I want to say that they are actually cleverer than people give them credit for, which I probably shouldn't be saying because I am a composer and a lyricist myself, so it goes against everything that I believe in when it comes to my craft. What are some of your favourites? Let's start with a bit about you and what draws you to the Jukebox Musical specifically.
Sure. So I would say my all-time favourite musical, jukebox or non, is Jersey Boys.
Mm-hmm.
And then a new favourite of mine, The Drifter's Girl.
Yep. Now, so I'm going to immediately step on your toes.
Go for it.
Are they jukebox musicals, or are they what I call, and you may feel free to use this term forever, biocools? So when I was...
I would go for it.
When I was younger, we had one called the Buddy Holly Story, and which is different to something like Tonight's the Night, for example, the Rod Stewart jukebox musical, which takes a story and shoehorns songs in. So do you think that... I mean, I haven't seen The Drifter's Girl. I really want... I do want to see it, and they just announced a new cast member, which is quite exciting. What do you think about that as a definition between the two kind of polarities pulling and pushing at each other within the jukebox realm?
Yeah, so I feel like it even goes beyond just like, I've never heard bio musicals. I've heard like biopic musicals, but I love the fusion. Because there's the jukebox in terms of your We Will Rock Yous, your Bat Out of Hells, isn't there? As you know, as you've described the differences. But there's also like Moulin Rouge, which fuses a lot of people's musical contributions to the world into one story. And I feel like they should even be separated from the average jukebox musical. I feel like there's a lot of sort of shoot-offs of
trees.
Spin-offs.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of branches to the jukebox tree.
And to me, the first jukebox musical ever goes back to as far as 1964. And it was in Theatre Royal Stratford East with Oh, What a Lovely War, which was a kind of satirical piece that commented on the war and added wartime songs. And to me, the jukebox musical is a very British thing, because if you think of all the popular jukebox musicals, apart from Jersey Boys, which someone described as a one-act play with songs, which I think is true, not being rude about it, but it is. Mamma Mia, We Will Rock You, all British things, and it's something that we should be proud of because we effectively invented a new genre of musical theatre.
Completely. And even The Drifter's Girl and Juliet, two very recent shows, debuted over here. I mean, I can't speak for all of the creative team behind both of them. I can't say that I know them, but they both started on British soil. Clearly there's a demand for it in this country that isn't seen elsewhere, or they don't seem to last as long in the States. For even Jersey Boys, homegrown over there, has closed twice in the last handful of years.
And
in New York.
What is it? Because I had a friend who saw Jersey Boys about 25 times. What is it about that show that people love so much?
It's so interesting because it's, I mean, again, like this is not a criticism of it, but it's quite a basic show. Like there's nothing spectacular. There's no glitz and glam in the show. Maybe it's the grit of the show that makes it so different from other shows. Certainly other jukebox musicals. The different types of takes you get on the characters I mean, that's no different from any other show, really.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it is about Jersey Boys, but maybe it's the music. Maybe, as they say, when it comes down to it, it is the music.
And I think the Jersey Boys and the Drifters, people going into those shows probably don't realise how many songs they know. Like, I mean, the Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons had so many hits, and you kind of forget, and then you see the show and you realize, oh, they did that. Same with the Drifters, like so many songs pop into your head when you, and I think that probably has a lot to do with them as well. My favourite jukebox musical, I think I have mentioned on this show before, is one called Our House, which is the Madness musical, and I think it's successful because it doesn't seem like the songs have been shoehorned like so many others do. I mean, I had a very soft spot for We Will Rock You because it was just ridiculous. And the reason I defend jukebox musicals, and especially We Will Rock You, is they say, oh, it's such a stupid storyline. I said, okay, well, you tell me what Bohemian Rhapsody is about. And that kind of stops people in their tracks, and they go, oh, yeah, that actually does work for the Queen mentality. What are some other ones of your favourites?
Some of my favourites. So recently as well, I've loved the Osmonds. Again, that plays on the nostalgia element that I think Jersey Boys and potentially the Drifters Girl as well harness. What else have I loved recently?
Doesn't have to be a jukebox musical. What did you think of what did you think of Moulin Rouge? Because that's probably one of the biggest jukebox musicals of all time.
I think it's a very beautiful production. Costumes, the lighting, the set is stunning.
Yeah,
it's an expensive show, and it looks it.
Yes.
You know where your money's gone. However, I feel like the story got a bit thrown by the wayside. Is that the phrase?
So I think we're on the same page here. The issue I have with it, and this goes against what we're trying to do, which is defend the jukebox musical, but I think it needs to be said. So Moulin Rouge works when you have the big production numbers in the club, and you can slice 9,000 pop songs into 3 minutes, and it's thrilling, and the lights are going mad. But for me, the moments it didn't work were the intimate, sentimental moments where she suddenly sings Katy Perry's Raw, and people are giggling at the kind of emotional moment. And I think that's where they would have benefited from having original songs written. So you can have the world of Moulin Rouge with the pop songs as you would have, and then you could have the kind of theatrical, musically theatre-y moments with the proper, with the kind of original songs that they could have done, but they didn't. It's still a hit, I think. It looks incredible. I mean, that I saw it on Broadway, and I enjoyed it more in London because I had better seats, so I was able to really kind of be, immersed. I hate that word, but kind of.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. Be immersed in the environment. It's a correct word because the production is immersive, and I think Moulin Rouge has its place because of the pop songs. I think, it really does work, but possibly not for the other ones. Saturday Night Fever is coming back, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. Or did that come back to, was it at the Peacock?
Something like that. Or was it,
yeah.
Or has it been and gone? Did we miss that?
I think it's been and gone. I think it might be going on tour.
Okay.
I can't say that's one I've seen.
I saw it years ago at the Palladium, and it was very exciting. The design was incredible. But so many of those... There was another bio call, Great Balls of Fire, based on Joey Lewis, and they are purely linking nostalgia. But how long is this genre going to last? Because there ain't many artists nowadays. I mean, we couldn't make it work with the Spice Girls, which is interesting, because... That's another thing to talk about, is if you have a back catalogue of songs no one's ever heard of, it doesn't really work when it comes to a jukebox musical. Are we going to have the Lady Gaga jukebox? Because music nowadays is such a fleeting thing, because we all have access to every piece of music ever made. There's no real, nowadays, I don't think, emotional connection to music, whereas there was for the oldies, which is what all these shows are relying on, whether it's the Drifters, whether it's Jersey Boys, Queen, that they're all from the past. And there aren't, apart from Moulin Rouge, which isn't, and even and Juliet, though people don't actually ever know who Max Martin is. Even so much in the programme, they have to have a thing saying, who is Max Martin? It just seems that there aren't many future for new jukebox musicals unless we keep going back to the past.
I think that's such an interesting point, because this craving for nostalgia pretty much is hanging on, no disrespect, the over 50s, who generally love their music, as you say. And there was, anyone is welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, but there was so much less choice for music back in the 70s and 80s, when these huge artists who now have jukebox musicals were mostly kicking around. There's so much choice now that I don't even think if in 30 years' time they made a One Direction jukebox musical, that it would even have the success that we would think it would.
Yeah.
When you say about the Spice Girls musical, obviously that didn't last too long.
No, I was busy that week. I didn't see
it. But we've had the Take That
yes.
musical, the band, which similarly kind of shoehorns songs into a story that isn't there. That's not to say I didn't have a brilliant time. Okay. I had a wonderful time at that show.
Oh, good.
But it's not great.
Now, forgive me, did you have a brilliant time because you were fans of Take That, or did you remove that from your mind and just go in blind, not knowing the material beforehand?
I had the advantage that I was a fan of Take That. I can't imagine anyone in that theatre when I went was not a fan of Take That and was just going to see what it was all about as an avid theatre goer. Everyone in that theatre was definitely around 35 to 50. And even the material of the show has a nostalgic element. At the beginning, it's set in the 90s, and it's these schoolgirls dancing along to Take That songs and having references to their radio and their boombox and all this sort of thing. So it captured the, atmosphere that people who were going to that show wanted. And that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, it knows what it's doing and it does it well. I wonder, you got me thinking now. I still don't think there's a market for newer artists to have jukebox musicals, because it's not, We Will Rock You played, 15, 18 years at the Dominion. Mamma Mia is playing forever, and there's the party, and there's the Avatar show, and there's, I think it's really those longing for nostalgia and also longing for escapism. And I think that's what these musicals offer more than other musicals, because it's the nostalgia element added on top of a party feel. It's like, I don't want to see that show because it's full of hen parties and it's such a horrible audience. But that's fine. That's what theatre has been about, is going and have a good time and showing your appreciation for it. What do you think of that stigma that's attached to jukebox musicals?
I think a lot of it comes from access to theatre. A lot of people maybe don't want to go to the theatre because partly they don't know what's on, but maybe they'll hear, there's a show coming out that features the music of
the Osmonds.
The Osmonds, yeah. Exactly. And okay, maybe I'll go and see that because I found it in my Osmonds fan group or in my mailing list. And they'll go and see that show, and then perhaps that is one of the only shows they'll see that year because they're more of a music fan. And I think it gets people that you would not usually get in, and I think that's always a bonus. yes, Mamma Mia might have a lot of hen parties, but that could be 10 people that would not have ordinarily been in a theatre and might have got a bit of a taste for it.
Yeah. It's like the same thing Disney do. And I saw Frozen recently, and the bit I remember, apart from how wonderful the show is there's an announcement before the show which says, please don't sing along, because there are children in the audience, and this might be their first ever theatrical show, and we don't want to ruin the experience for them. And I thought that was so lovely how they, and that is also important for theatre. And I think if jukebox musicals can do that, can bring more people into the theatre, that's great. But they are so expensive. I mean, that is another big issue, because jukebox shows are not cheap to put on, whether they're touring or not. I don't know, you see more touring shows than I do, so I don't know how the prices are comparable. But does it limit audiences, do you think? Because you were confused about Anything Goes is not selling very well this time round, is it? Which isn't a jukebox musical, but it was such a hit on London, and in London, I wonder if the television performance has hampered that.
Well, exactly. Like, London broke box office records, and Anything Goes on tour has not been selling fantastically well. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And the tickets, I'm not going to say they were cheap because it's so subjective, but there were a lot of tickets in my local theatre going for £13 that were just unsold.
Wow.
Having said that, though, when Jersey Boys has been to my local, which is the Bristol Hippodrome, when Jersey Boys has been there, granted pre-pandemic, packed out houses, and there were no £13 tickets then. All of the cheap seats were at minimum £20.
That's fascinating. Because one would think it would be the other way round.
Yeah.
And also, I think jukebox musicals are going to be around for a long time, because we saw when 9/11 happened, when the Great Depression happened in New York, there was a huge demand for light entertainment afterwards. Yes. Then when 9/11 happened, there was a huge demand for light entertainment, thus shows like The Producers and Hairspray, all very popular. And now there's, even a bigger demand for people to be back in the theatre. But it has led to an interesting, and this is a bit of a side topic, and I don't know if you noticed, people have forgotten how to behave in the theatre. And this has been a big discussion that's been going around in various circles, mostly at jukebox musicals, because of the whole party environment. So I wonder if that's a stigma that's, again, some people have against it. But you shouldn't really, because it's I remember when I saw, going back to Buddy, they had signs up saying, please no dancing in the aisles until the finale, which is lovely.
And when was that? What year did that come out?
It's a 90s show, so it toured everywhere. It did world tours, and I saw it at the Strand Theatre, which is now the Novello Theatre. And then it went to the Victoria Palace. It played there as well. They filmed it, so probably quite ahead of its time. There is a filmed version of it if you wanted to watch it. And I will say, I've said this on the show before, it's the only piece of theatre to ever make me cry.
Oh,
because the way that it's a terribly sad story anyway, but the way they do his death got me. But the funny thing was, I'd seen it 5 times before. So maybe it was the fact that I was so emotionally connected to the show that the death really, or the death of 3 of them, really hit me. And it was just staged so simply and beautifully. And it's just interesting how, if you go into a show, they used to have a saying about when Lloyd Webber's shows first opened, he would always release the kind of hit songs before. So you go in humming the songs and you leave humming the set. That was the joke about kind of shows back in the 80s. And I think that has kind of made its way into jukebox musicals. People like familiarity. And, I do want to talk about what theatre lets you do to these songs next. But you said you had some notes. So what are your thoughts, if we can hand the baton over to you?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot packed in what you've said there about the good old theatre etiquette debate, but also the familiarity. Gosh, that is a difficult word.
Familiarity.
Yeah, There we go.
It's after the word you're after, don't worry.
But also post-pandemic, and like you said, post 9/11, post-depression. I think it's hard to encourage people back into a theatre when there's a cost of living crisis, into a show where they ultimately have not heard of it. Come From Away is my biggest example of this. It's whenever I'm making the comparison, I always use Come From Away, because in the title, nothing suggests what it's about.
No.
I mean, even the show, like the themes around it, it doesn't overly.
The 9/11 musical, it wouldn't look good on the poster, would it?
Exactly. And I feel like it is colloquially. Oh, that's another one.
Very good.
You know what I mean. Known as the 9/11 musical.
Yeah.
And post-pandemic, I feel like it is so hard to get people to encourage to pay what is probably going to be upwards of £100 night out to go and see the 9/11 musical.
Yeah.
Now, you and I and the listeners know it is not the 9/11 musical.
No. And another example I can think of, which next week we got Steve Brown on, who wrote this, and it is I Can't Sing. It's like, am I going to see a musical with the title I Can't Sing? It doesn't bode very well. And that didn't get the audiences. Once you're in, it was brilliant. And it was, I say to Steve, who wrote it, it's one of the funniest 1920s musical comedies I think I'd ever seen. And it's just that hard thing of getting bums on seats. And that's what jukebox musicals can do, is what you're saying, isn't it?
Exactly. You get in the title what it's about. You get Jersey Boys. I mean, it doesn't really say what it's about, but it's been around for long enough that people know. It's always, promoting itself on This Morning and The One Show. It's just got that brand recognition. The Drifter's Girl in the title, Tina in the title. And in a post-pandemic, cost of living crisis world, getting people to part with £100 on something they don't know about is so difficult. I think that when jukebox musicals have this stigma that it brings in Joe Public, I think theatres and audiences and shows should be so grateful that those audiences are there. Yes, they may not be behaving, not a fan of the word, but behaving in the way that the average theatre goer behaves. But they're there, they've spent their money, they've decided to go and see a show. And when there's so much on TV that's free, or they're paying for Netflix, which is infinitely cheaper than a theatre ticket for one night, we should be thankful that they're wanting to go.
Yeah.
That's not to say the fights that have happened, the abuse that front of house staff get, the abuse that actors get is excused. It's absolutely not. But that's such a small minority. That's what's the loudest. That's what we see on social media. One only ever reads negative reviews online. One never reads the positive, because people don't like to go and be positive online, do they? Exactly.
But
sorry, I don't mean to be silent.
Right.
I'm just thinking of my thoughts. But going into, sorry, I'm fluffing what I'm.
It's okay.
thinking. Is this editable?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. But yes, the fact that they're going into a theatre at all when prices are so high.
When so many actors have been out of work, they are, they're big employers of talent. Which brings me on to the theatricality of jukebox musicals, because this is something that I do enjoy, is hearing, I myself as a musician, arranger, composer, whatever, hearing what the theatrical team involved have done with these songs. And I want to use Our House as an example. Book by Tim Firth, which is great, which is why it makes sense, because he's a composer and lyricist himself. He did the Calendar Girls musical with Gary Barlow. So he knows how to structure a piece, but with songs interspersed, directed by Matthew Warchus, who's a hero of mine. And they were able to put counterpoint songs together. They were able to bring back songs that mean things in different ways. And it's so, when you look at Our House, for example, it's so obvious. The show opens with a guy, he's 16, he's going into the chemist and he's buying some condoms for, to celebrate his thing into adulthood. So you have the lyrics, "Good morning, miss, can I help you, son? 16 today and up for fun." Got some party poppers that pop in the night. It's just, you think, if you didn't know Madness, you would think these songs were written for the scene. And I think it's so important to have the right people working on these shows. Yes, we all laugh at We Will Rock You, how there's a character called Scaramouche and there's another character called Galileo Figaro, and we all know what's going to happen. But it works because it's the insanity of Queen's stuff. So it works within that universe. But some jukebox musicals, you can see why they get a bit of eye rolling attached to them, because it doesn't work within that kind of realm. But you seem to be more drawn to the shows building on the back catalogues of an artist and using their story to tell, like Beautiful, for example.
Yes.
What jukebox musicals do you like where it's a fictional plot and they've shoehorned the songs into it, like Tonight's the Night or We Will Rock You or Mamma Mia, or what? Because that's what I think of when I think of jukebox musicals. What ones of those do you like, and which ones can you defend?
Sure. Well, I loved the original production of We Will Rock You at the Dominion.
Yes.
Absolutely loved it. I think it was the high energy, the big sets that kind of made up for the fact the story was a bit naff. The script was a bit naff, but that's why we loved it.
But also it was the theatrical singing, that those difficult songs, only musical theatre people get away with making the riffs and the endings of those songs even better. And that's why it works so well in that big theatre, because it's doing the rock concert, but it's putting theatrical, Carrie Ellis, if you listen to her version of Only the Good Die Young and stuff, it's just amazing. It's even better than Freddie Mercury, dare I say.
Well, that is a bold claim. But Freddie Mercury has the theatricality. Queen songs have storytelling, if not in the lyrics, in the music. And that's why it lent itself so well to the material. And like you say, the riffs, the belting. I mean, I was young when I saw it for the first time, but I'd never seen anything like it. It sort of blew my expectations of theatre.
But it's interesting. When it first opened, it was We Will Rock You. And going to what you were saying earlier, no one went to see it.
Right.
It was only when they added the Queen musical did people flock to it. And it was so close to closing, and they kind of breathed new life into it by putting the subtitle, The Queen Musical. And that proves that people need to know, especially with a jukebox musical, that I guess if they called it Bohemian Rhapsody, people might have gone to see it. I think that's a better title myself, but it doesn't really matter. So we Will Rock You, the original big rock jukebox musical. Any others?
So I've seen Priscilla, and I liked it. I wouldn't say it was my favourite, but I felt like a lot of the songs didn't matter. You could have put any 80s anthem in there. And I guess that goes against the whole argument that we just covered about
discussion. Yes.
Discussion we had about how the songs actually fit. But that's just my opinion on Priscilla and how it's presented. Which
production did you see? Did you see the Palace Theatre production, or was it one of the many tours that have gone around?
It was the most recent tour, yeah. So perhaps there's been changes.
I've never seen it, but I have. We've had people on the podcast who have seen it, and it's been a firm favourite. I'm going to chuck some long words at you now, and you're free to say you don't know what they are because no one's ever heard of them unless you listen to this podcast, because they're words I mention a lot, and they are important when it comes to discussing jukebox musicals, are the diegenesis of the songs. So are they diegetic or are they non-diegetic? And the things, for example, Buddy Holly, they're all diegetic because they're all happening in the time, in the recording studio, in... on stage with the audience watching the gig. Beautiful, it does diegetic and non-diegetic, and I think the cleverest thing Beautiful does, which I remember, I only saw it once when it first opened, was the Act 1 ending when she's just furious at this situation and it takes one fine day and really twists it on its head. That is clever use of a jukebox musical. In Priscilla, what do they do there? Are they singing the songs for the sake of the story, or are they singing the songs to kind of move the story forward? There's
a little bit of both, if I remember correctly. I don't remember there being too many diegetic, if I'm using that correctly, moments. They do exist, but comparatively, I don't think there was that many, at least not if memory serves. It was the first show I saw after all of the number of lockdowns we had, so long time ago now, but
God, it doesn't seem like it, does it? It's so bizarre what we've been through, but that's another discussion entirely. So Priscilla, what about Mamma Mia? I mean, that's been playing for 4,000 years, so have you seen that? Do you have any interest in seeing it? What's your I mean, you have to, it's probably the most popular jukebox musical of all time. The fact that I think it's the most popular musical. I know it's played in more places than any other show ever in the history of the world, and spawned possibly 3 films and the dinner experience. So it's done something well, hasn't it? Have you seen that?
So I actually haven't seen it because I've been a ticket holder for 4 years. I'm seeing it next month, finally. So I was meant to see it a long time before this, but of course I've seen both films. And I remember when it came out, my sister said she didn't like it because if you take out all the songs, it still made sense.
Okay.
Which can be said of, your standard musical as well, pre-40s.
If you take out the songs of a good musical, there should be massive plot holes.
Yes.
So what the writers of Mamma Mia have never admitted is that it's actually based on a story, that it's not an original plot at all. They nicked it from something, but I can't remember what it's called, and some listeners are probably shouting at me, it's this. It's like, I think what Mamma Mia does, again, it's that party environment. It's just, it's that kind of, it's why they air Death in Paradise in January, because it gives us that kind of summer escapism, which we all do crave. And ABBA are incredible songwriters, and they're baked in theatricality, all their songs, so it only makes sense that you put them onto stage. I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on it. Well, I saw it at the Prince Edward Theatre a million years ago when it opened, and it didn't have Waterloo in it.
Oh,
so that was added. So I saw it so early on in its inception or conception, or whatever you want to look at it. They had a boat on stage called the SS Waterloo, but it was never in it. So I'd be very interested in seeing it again, because it has been however long it's been open for, 20 years or something, and to see how society and theatre has changed that show. I've seen the film, of course, but I want to see how long the mega mix is at the end, because
20 minutes.
And stuff like that. So
well, I think it's interesting with Mamma Mia as well. I mean, it can probably be said for Les Mis and other musicals that have had a movie out while the stage show is still running. That, I mean, maybe a small point, but the girl playing Sophie used to have dark hair. And then since the movie, on the whole, as far as I've seen and read, she's had blonde hair. And that's purely based on the brand recognition of Amanda Seyfried in the film.
If you saw the Bob Fosse Chicago, Velma is blonde and Roxy is a brunette. If you look at the film, obviously Renee Zellweger and Catherine Zeta-Jones, it's the other way around, but they haven't changed that. So I don't know. That's really interesting. Obviously, Grease, is that a jukebox musical? Because it's sure turning into one.
something that I see as contested.
Yes. The film obviously had Hound Dog and stuff in it, and they haven't gone to the realm of putting that in. But Grease is a different beast entirely, and we talked about it on the show. But I mean, how many versions of Grease are we going to have flung in our faces? But obviously, Sandy in this production, played by a friend of mine, Olivia Moore, she is a brunette, and people saying, "Oh, it's not like the film. I don't like it." It's like, well, you're not seeing the film, you're seeing the stage show, and it might be written in the original script that she was a brunette. But yeah, I just want Grease 2 on stage, because song about reproduction, it's brilliant.
I mean, what more could you want from a
Exactly.
musical?
So I'm trying to think, I mean, Tonight's a Night, did that ever spring up in your memory?
So I haven't seen it, but I feel like it's one of those shows that goes to like local town halls, and I think I've seen it billed and I've just somehow avoided it.
As a fan of the Jukebox Musical, would you see it? Or do you have to like the songs in the first place?
Well, I'm terribly untrendy, so I like Rod Stewart's music, which probably...
Do you think
helps.
he's sexy?
Oh, yeah, he's got hot legs.
Just like Penny did. I want to talk about a Jukebox Musical. To me, I know we're not really defending it. We're just kind of a Jukebox music. It wasn't even a Jukebox Musical. It was a concert, and it makes me so upset. I'm a massive Billy Joel fan, and if anyone is having a proper book-based Jukebox Musical screaming to be written with material, it's him, because he's a great storyteller. And it really irks me that we were stuck with moving out this weird ballet thing with a band on stage. It's like, it's such a wasted opportunity. And what is the artist that you would love to see a Jukebox Musical created of the back catalogue? That's not even a sentence, but you know what I mean.
I've got you. I completely agree on the Billy Joel front. His songs are stories in themselves, which perhaps maybe doesn't work for a musical. If so many songs are stories in themselves, how would that work on stage?
There are ways to make it work. You could do the Rock of Ages or Moulin Rouge style thing, get the right arrangers in to combine different songs. I've sat about this on the toilet and thought about it a lot. So yes, it could work. Similarly,
Mika is the artist I think that I would like to see have a Jukebox Musical next. So theatrical, draws on so many different genres and styles of music that you would never get the same sounding song one after the other.
Eurovision's Mika. I mean, I watch Eurovision, as did everyone in the entire country, and I hadn't, obviously you're a big fan of his, but sadly I hadn't heard the name for a very long time. And suddenly these, oh yes, Mika, I remember him. He was great. So that might be a nice way to kind of put him really back into the public sphere. Sorry, an email just came through from Zoom charging me for £15 a month. The obvious one is the Beatles. Now they've toyed with them, haven't they? But it's never really picked up.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's just because it's such a property that all fans of the Beatles feel like they own a part of it, and if anything with the Beatles is handled just slightly wrong, it's rubbish. I went to see Let It Be when it was at the Prince of Wales for a very short amount of time, I think.
God, yes.
And that was purely going because I was a Beatles fan, not because I wanted to experience a story or the theatre. They could have been playing a local concert hall and I probably still would have gone.
Yeah.
I had a great time, but I just don't know how...
I mean, you'd think Yellow Submarine would be the musical to do, but that would just be like a sort of drugs provided upon entry and just see what happens to you. The film Yesterday, did you see that?
I did see that, yes.
Would that work on stage, do you think?
I think it could, with a lot of revisions. It felt slightly disappointing in that it just ended up being a PR ad for Ed Sheeran.
Right. God, the Ed Sheeran Jukebox Musical. Oh, that just
the worst.
sprung into my mind.
No, I'm defending them. It will be brilliant whenever it comes out. But Yesterday, as a story, I think it was clever. Even though I know it has got some issues surrounding whether it was an original Rachel Curtis writing or not. But it could work on stage. It has that charm. It's very British. It reminds me of like Bend It Like Beckham, Calendar Girls, Made in Dagenham, that kind of quirky British
vibe
movie/musical. Yeah.
So I think we've exhausted everything we can say about jukebox musicals, but it's so nice to sit and talk about them without really slandering them, because it's so easy to do, and I think it's quite hard to kind of pick out the positives, but I think we've done rather well. So I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on Mamma Mia. I think the I was just the granddaddy, but it's more like the grandmummy of jukebox musicals. Are you an ABBA fan? Are you curious about the ABBA concert thing that's happening, and that they seem to be a big topic at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm actually going on Monday.
Oh, very nice.
Made sure that I was front of the queue for that.
Yes.
And like you say, ABBA are practically taking over London at the moment. There's something in the air that everyone wants to see ABBA in some form, whether that is Mamma Mia or the Avatars.
Yeah. Or chess. Exactly.
That comes around every few years, doesn't it?
Yes, the expensive concert productions that we're getting. I do enjoy jukebox musicals. I enjoy oldies, and I think you have to like oldies to like jukebox musicals. But sometimes you can see a jukebox musical without knowing the material and leave thinking, "Oh, I'm going to research that artist because I really like them," and that's another positive spin I think you can find on them.
Definitely. And if people are willing to part with their cash to go and see Jersey Boys, and they think they've never heard a Frankie Valli song before, and they come out loving it, then yeah, bonus. Have
you seen Jersey Boys in the new theatre that it's in, the Trafalgar Theatre, whatever it's called, the Green Theatre?
That's the one.
Did you see it in the Prince Edward?
I did. I saw it in the Prince Edward, the Piccadilly, and the Trafalgar, yes.
So how does the smaller venue work? Do we still have the drummer floating around the stage at any given point, or was that all being cut?
He does float about the stage, but not nearly as much, if I remember correctly. I actually hated it when I first saw it. Okay. Interestingly, at the Prince Edward, I thought it was so drowned by how big the theatre was, not only the stage but the auditorium. I was also so far back, and as you know, it's such a minimalistic show that having a more intimate theatre works so much better. And then when it moved to the Piccadilly, fell in love with it. I saw it 4 years later. Maybe I was a bit older, so I could understand the story more. But yeah, it just clicked. Something clicked.
That's interesting. And do you agree that it's a one-act play with songs?
Well, now I've heard that phrase in relation to Jersey Boys. Yes.
Yes. Nothing wrong with that. That's what musicals do, is they make an evening longer. Rebecca, where can people follow you and all that stuff that the young kids do these days?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Stagey Rebecca. I'm on Instagram at Stagey Rebecca. Yep. And I have a blog that I've mildly abandoned, but has about 3 articles if you're interested in reading them, stageyrebecca.co.uk.
Lovely. And you also do you're maligning the loss of tickets, aren't you? So you kind of like to create your own tickets, which is quite cute.
That's right, yeah. So I have a very small business called Stagey Tickets, where I recreate all of the e-tickets in physical form for everyone's scrapbooks or their collection, because I knew that I was going to miss my physical tickets, and lo and behold, others missed theirs as well. We
do love today ticks, but I mean, there's nothing glamorous about a barcode, is there?
There really isn't.
I'm a collector of programs myself over tickets. Nice. Obviously we're not going to use tickets anymore. I see what you mean, but I do like the whole we're going digital now, because it just makes so much sense. And don't even get me started on the mess of how Broadway do Today Ticks, because that's just bizarre. You have to meet someone to pick your ticket up outside the theatre.
They have, I can't remember what they call it. They had a fancy word of like chaperone.
Concierge, I think.
Concierge, that was it.
But yeah, so thank you so much for joining us on Musical Talk. Have you on again soon if you want. Thank you for talking about Jukebox musicals. I'm going to leave this episode now. Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
It was lovely to chat.
Yes, and I shall see you next week. We'll be discussing Tony, the Tony Blair rock opera with composer and lyricist Steve Brown. Until then, have a lovely week and goodbye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Musical Talk. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk, you can visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk, where you'll find all our episodes, or you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Musical Talk.